whatever I don't even know what you would call this. I'm sure they have a term for it. I don't know. What I would just call this monstrous. It's unspeakably evil if this is truly going on. And it does seem to be going on. The only question is to what extent and to how far will it go? How long has it been going on? How far will it go into the future? How far are they willing to go? Like this is the sentence that I highlighted earlier. It raises questions to the extent to which the US and its allies are willing to compromise their morals in the pursuit of technological and military superiority. After everything I've just read, and we're just getting started, really, we haven't even gotten into the worst stuff yet. Seems like they might actually be willing to do something like this. Hello, welcome to Inspired Earth. We have the season finale. We are finally here. I've been thinking about how to do this episode for so long, what to put in it, how long it should be, and I kind of just said, screw it, I'm just going to do the best I can. I had dedicated the show, I guess this is kind of a good moment to talk about this, considering it's the season finale. I had dedicated the show to Art Bell and Ian Punnett, and I had also mentioned Allie Ward, and Allie Ward makes a different podcast named Ologies, and the reason I bring her name up is because she had inspired me. That she said in just a random episode I was listening, and she said, I was starting my podcast and I was trying to be a perfectionist, and I just kept on putting off the episode, delaying it over and over, and she said she just had to eventually just put it out and be okay with the way that it was, no matter what. And that's basically what I'm gonna have to do with this episode, because I've thought about how to go about talking about these topics and what angle to approach them from for so long, longer than I can even count, because I haven't been counting, but for a very long time, longer than I would even imagine if I knew what it was, I'm sure. But so it's not going to be perfect, and I'm just going to do the best that I can, and it might be a little bit long. This honestly could be probably like 3, 4, 5, 6 episodes. You could make this into like a whole season in its own, this one episode. But we don't have time for that. We don't have production for that. We don't have money for that. We don't have anything for that. So I'm just going to do what I can. And this is probably going to be one of those episodes I had talked about before, like the UFO, alternative energy, some of the more intense topics that I would give a warning about. And this is going to be one of those episodes that if you're having trouble with mental problems of different sorts, then you might want to skip past some parts, or just not listen to it, or come back whenever you're feeling better, because this is going to be one hell of an episode. And if you're on the edge, then this is not the time to listen to this one. However, if you're looking for some inspiration and you're like frustrated or pissed off or even disappointed or whatever, like, this might be exactly the information you need. It's going to give clarity to a lot of stuff, but it can be definitely overwhelming, and I just wanted to share that this is not for the faint of heart, and what we're talking about is serious, and this isn't made up. This is I'm almost nervous even talking about this and recording this episode, for a variety of reasons, but it has to be done, and we're gonna do the best that we can. And like I said, I've thought about this for a long time, of how to talk about this, and there's no real way to, I mean, you could think about this endlessly. This is like past 4D chess, or we're into like 5D chess or 10D chess, you know, like 10-dimensional chess. This is yeah, this is like deeper than I feel like anybody could organize on themselves. So whatever, I'm just gonna get into it. We're gonna start off with a little bit of a story before we go into the information, and the story will kind of reflect the information as well as kind of the modern times a little bit. So we're going to start off with this magazine from Notre Dame University, winter 24-25. So I assume that was pretty recent, that this is a new edition. Where their loyalties lie, the Oberwinder brothers from Notre Dame were not who they say they were. And I'm probably going to butcher the German pronunciation, so I'm sorry about that. I don't know German very well, but there is a recording of this article that's free to listen to. You can send to people, which is really cool, because this is a really cool article, and I'm probably not going to do as good as whoever was recording this. Who knows, they might even have sound effects and music. I have no idea. I haven't listened to it. It's 20 minutes long on their recording. I don't know how long this is going to be. Probably not as long. I'm going to skip parts of it, but I also might expand on parts of it, so who knows how long it'll be. But it'll be worth it, and then we'll kind of reflect on some other stuff, and it'll tie into other stuff. So dressed in a silver gray shirt, a military belt, and black trousers, Helmut Oberwinder is flanked by uniformed troops bearing the flags of the United States and Nazi Germany. He marches in formation with 5 other men in German Social Hall in Astoria, Queens, in New York City. They are undergoing a secret initiation to become full-fledged members of the Unterdunst, the uniformed division of Amerikanischer Volksbund, also known as German America Bund. Just sorry, one last warning and like announcement before we continue on. Some of this stuff may be really shocking and may even set off the algorithm. So I just wanted to say that this is not an endorsement of any sort of negativity. This is just a historical account of history, and we are learning from history here. So that's all that this is. This is just a history lesson. So yeah, I just had to say that for the algorithm and the listeners. So just months after joining the Bund, Oberwinder is reaching its highest levels. Standing before the flags, he extends a stiff right arm and gives the Hitler salute. The post leader shakes Oberwinder's hand as the veteran members loudly voice 3 Sieg Heil cheers. I'm a U.S. Nazi stormtrooper, a new recruit declares in a first-person essay published 7 weeks later. Herr Oberwinder is not who he says he is. In 1937, 2 Chicago newspaper reporters went undercover and infiltrated the Bund, a pro-Nazi organization that organized marches and rallies, provided weapons training, and ran summer camps for people of German descent and their families. The 2 men, John C. James and James G. Metcalf, who were brothers, published an explosive series of stories in the Chicago Daily Times. The articles were provided first-hand accounts of stormtroopers marching under the swastika banner on American soil, children being taught the Nazi salute, and verbal attacks on Catholicism and Cardinal George Mundelein of Chicago. The Amerikanischer Volksbund was created the year before as an organization for Americans of German heritage. The group operated youth and family training camps and was growing rapidly in 70 regional divisions across the country. Excuse me. And then we have here Chicago Daily Times from Thursday, September 9th, 1937, 2 cents, and we have these drawings of the men here, and like a newspaper clipping Secrets of Nazi Army and USA by Times, Men Who Joined It. The newspaper expose reported that Bund leaders were telling their approximately 20,000 members that communists and Jews were plotting a violent revolution to seize control of the United States. When that revolution started, Bund members would crush them. The paper quoted a Bund leader: "We will save America for white Americans." The goal was to consolidate all fascist elements in America into a giant Bund-led movement. The series was reprinted in newspapers across the nation and earned the journalist the National Headliner Club Award for Best Domestic Reporting. The coverage raised alarm among readers, prompted creation of congressional committee to investigate Nazi activity in America and heighten national awareness of events unfolding in Germany under Chancellor Adolf Hitler. The story of Bund and Metcalfe's expose was recounted in a 2024 PBS documentary called Nazi Town, USA. The Metcalfes, who spoke fluent German, joined the Bund using the names Helmut Oberwinder and James Oberwinder. Those were not fictional personas. They were the brothers' birth names, and they were names they were known by during their youth as minims and high school students at Notre Dame. There's a picture of the two. The road to Notre Dame. The Oberwinder brothers were born in Germany, Helmut in 1904, James in 1906. They were two of four children of Richard Maria Wilhelm Oberwinder, a German journalist, and his American wife, Bernice Roche Metcalfe, a gifted pianist from Notched, Mississippi. The couple had met while Bernice was studying music at the University of Dresden. I'm going to skip some of their life. Like I said, you can listen to it. The brothers attended Notre Dame until 1922, then moved to Chicago. James, who had been a Holy Cross Cimmerian for 2 years, earned a law degree from La Jolla University, then joined the FBI as an agent in the Chicago Bureau from 1931 to 1935. He worked on operations targeting several well-known gangsters, including Ma Burker, Pretty Boy Floyd, and John Dillinger, and was among the agents who ambushed and killed Dillinger outside Chicago's Biograph Theater in 1934. Excuse me, I'm going to drink some tea for my throat. John took journalism classes in night school, then worked as a reporter for several newspapers and the Associated Press before landing at the Chicago Daily Times, the city's first tabloid, in 1936. Although the Metcalfes were U.S. citizens by birth, through their mother they went through the formal process to be declared naturalized American citizens on the advice of an FBI contact, in case a Nazi official might claim them for Germany, because there was conscriptions going on at that point, I would assume. Undercover operations. In 1937, using their German birth certificates, John Metcalfe joined the Bund Division in New York City, while James Metcalfe became a member of a similar group in Chicago. Also working on the project was reporter William Muller, who, unlike the Metcalfes, couldn't speak or read German. A relatively small but rapidly growing army is preparing for the American equivalent of Der Tag, the team reported, using a popular German toast, to the day, referring to an imminent military engagement. The men built themselves up as Nazi sympathizers and were readily accepted, attending Bund meetings where they heard calls for boycotts of Jewish businesses, drilling the Bund troops, and visiting the group's summer camps. The series, accompanied by plentiful photos, described the 20 or so Bund-ran youth and family training camps across the U.S., where American children were being indoctrinated in Nazi rituals and flaming swastikas lit up at nighttime gatherings like the fiery crosses at Ku Klux Klan rallies. Founded by German immigrant Fritz Kuhn in Buffalo, New York, 1936, the German-American Bund was created to promote Nazi ideology within the United States. Bund members used patriotic imagery such as paintings of George Washington and the American flag to attract Americans of German descent. The group's goals, according to Kuhn, the self-styled American Führer, were to create a socially just, white Gentile-ruled United States and a Gentile-controlled labor union free from Jewish Moscow-directed domination. So Gentile, let me just remind people, if they don't remember, that's basically they're saying a white Christian United States, so like a Christian ethno-state. And here we have the swastika and all of these Nazi flags and emblems as they're parading through New York with the American flag, with a band and people watching. Between 1919 and 1933, sorry, before I go on, I will just also say that the doctors and scientists in the 30s were pretty supportive of eugenics. And if you go and look up how Hitler was inspired by the South and Texas Rangers, Jim Crow, the antebellum South, all of the South United States and slavery and Jim Crow and all of that, Hitler was obsessed with it, and that's what inspired him to do everything he did in Germany. So I just wanted to say that. So like the doctors and the scientists, as well as basically the majority of the South, were like pro-Nazi at this time, or at least the Nazi was pro-them, pro-Southern, like antebellum, racist, Dixiecrat type people. And then it ended up transitioning later into like a different type of thing. But so we'll move on here. But the path to war between 1919 and 1933, more than 400,000 Germans immigrated to the United States, driven in large part by Germany's collapse after World War I. Some considered themselves temporary refugees who would return home when the economic and political turmoil in their homeland righted itself. Bund membership was drawn largely from the recent immigrants. That's interesting. So they're focusing on immigrants. After Hitler's rise to power in 1933 and throughout the decade, Americans were well informed of happenings in Nazi Germany. U.S. newspapers and movie theater newsreels routinely detailed events in Germany, including the persecution of Jews and burning of books by degenerate authors. News reports also covered the creation of the first concentration camps in 1933 and 1935, Nuremberg laws that stripped Jews of their German citizenship and eliminated their civil rights. So the reason that we had the Nuremberg trials in Nuremberg was because that's where they started the Holocaust. So it ended and began, well, it's supposed to have been at that place. Americans were facing their own problems amid the Great Depression. With widespread unemployment and the ecological devastation of the Dust Bowl out west, the tragedy of the Great War was still fresh for many Americans, encouraging isolationist views and vows of no more foreign wars. When the Chicago reporters infiltrated the Bund, some of the biggest events of the decade were yet to come. Germany's annexation of Austria in March 1938, the Kristallnacht of violent pogroms against Jewish people and their synagogues and businesses in November 1938, and Hitler's march into Poland in September 1939. Polls conducted after Kristallnacht and found that Americans overwhelmingly disapproved of the Americans' treatment of Jews, but almost 71% also opposed raising the quota of Jewish refugees permitted to immigrate to the United States. So they okay, this is interesting here, because so I have to also say that the Nazis started out with, they didn't just start out with the Holocaust, they started out with mass deportations. And they started with targeted groups, people that they were using as scapegoats. Like they were saying that the economy was bad because of the Jews, like we had already said, and like gypsies and gays and blacks and like disabled people, and like these are the people holding back society, was what they were saying. So they started deporting them And that's the British were like basically. I mean, a lot of people are not going to want to hear this, but if you're a history buff, then you know what I'm talking about. The British and the Nazis were very similar to one another, very very similar, and they worked together to help deport the Jews. And this is, I have documents on this. Well, I don't have it, but the University of Texas and the Tolerance Museum have these letters between the Nazis and the British, and there's lots of evidence between it. I'm not just making it up. There's a ton of evidence. They said it themselves. If you go back and look, like all of their documents are there. The British and the Nazis started a lot of these problems in the Middle East with this deportation program. They started deporting the Jews of Eastern Europe to what the British basically carved out of Palestine. And the reason that the British picked Palestine was because they said that they had a weak national identity, so they would be easy to erase. So the British are saying that they can commit genocide on the Palestinians to allow the Jewish, like white, your Eastern people to come and take the land in the Middle East. And that from there they would use this as like a jumping point between Nazi Germany and the British colonies, who were extremely racist, killed even more people than Hitler, faster than Hitler. But I'm not saying that Hitler was good, obviously. I'm saying that Hitler's really bad. I'm just saying that the British get this rap that I don't know, that people don't know how bad they were. Like the British killed like maybe more than Hitler, faster than Hitler in India, for example. So, and Churchill was extremely racist. It was just outright, openly racist. So what I'm saying is the British and the Nazis worked together to help deport the Jews, and it started with mass deportation. And I'll also say that on all of this, I've talked about Palestine right now and in the past, and with Palestine rights and like Israel, with this quote unquote war that has a ceasefire right now, that the majority of, especially me, but a majority of Palestinian activists, anti-war demonstrators, and all of the anti-war protests, or majority of them that were going around the country, were pro-Jewish. Okay, a lot of the anti-war protests to try to advocate for the rights of the Palestinians were Jewish people. I had not been to a Jewish Passover before the war with Gaza and Israel, and that was Jewish people making a Passover event in honor of the Palestinians. So all of this media narrative of saying that like the anti-war protests were anti-Semitic is bullshit. They were organized by Jewish people. Again, and the reason that well, not all of them, the reason that some of them were organized by Jewish people is because the Israel doing what they're doing makes Jewish people around the world in danger. Because Israel's breaking the law. And that's also just outright, like, that's why the International Court is going after them. So, I know this is very technical, but it all comes back to what's going on today. And that the Nazis and the British started all of this. And it's still going on today. So, I'll just end it there. And I'll just say super quick, it's super important to go and learn the legalities of the war with Israel and what they are doing. Because according to the United Nations, International Criminal Court, International Court of Justice, like, it is clear that Israel is breaking the law, and they have been since the 1940s. So we'll just move on from that. Hopefully we can talk about it at another time. there's literally legislation coming down the pipe right now to make war talk about Palestine and Israel illegal. That I like to not even be able to use the word Israel or Zionism or maybe even war or Palestine. And there's some legislation coming down the pipe that you can't talk bad about Nazis. So like literally everything I'm talking about in this episode or so far could be potentially, illegal at some point. To read this history and to say these words could be legislated. Hopefully it won't be. Hopefully that will die, that those bills. I mean, that's just ridiculous. But yeah, I can show you videos of like me in person at places where they come up and say that if you use the word Israel, then we're going to arrest you. And it's wild that we live in America and there's protests going on nonstop right now with these anti-deportation protests. It's wild we live in America where we can protest against our own government and our own military or immigration policies or yada yada yada, but we can't protest against Israel. If we protest against Israel, then Governor Abbott will send in the state troopers to come and beat us all up in military gear illegally and then drop the charges afterwards. But we can criticize our own government, but we can't criticize Israel. So that just goes to show how much power Israel has over our lobbying system and the money that's in play right now. And the fact that, like I said, that the actual Jewish people that believe in that religion do not believe in what the nation of Israel is doing. So I feel like I summarized that pretty good. But navigating a minefield. But yeah, so that was like a pretty good summation of that. We'll just move on. We're like over halfway through. Helmut Oberwinder quickly became a trusted aide to Kuhn, who chose him as a personal representative to visit Boone chapters around the country and report back on their activities, membership, and due collections to assure that they were adhering to the group's national policies and goals. Over the course of 6 months, John Metcalf traveled 20,000 miles on behalf of Boone leadership, secretly gathering material for the Times series. Notably, he attended a 4th of July celebration at Camp Siegfried in Yaphank, Long Island, where the camp's main thoroughfare was called Adolf Hitler Street. The downfall of Boone would largely be brought about by one of the men attending the 1937 4th of July celebration, historian Bradley W.H. Hart wrote in his 2018 book, Hitler's American Friends, the Third Reich Supporter in the United States. He was wearing the uniform of German-American Bund, a Hitler-style shirt and tie with Sam Brown belt, and his hair and mustache shaped to imitate the Führer's personal styling. For all appearances, he would have cut the profile of an avid Hitler admirer, and to his comrades in the Bund, he was exactly this. That seeming Hitler enthusiast was John Metcalf. Since at least 1887, when New York World reporter Nellie Bly had herself committed in order to expose the appalling conditions in an insane asylum, undercover reporting had become a regular and impactful, albeit controversial, tool in American journalism. Today, the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics states, avoid undercover or other surreptitious methods of gathering information unless traditional open methods will not yield information vital to the public. In 1938, in the aftermath of the newspaper series, John Metcalf appeared before Texas Congressman Martin Dye's House Committee investigating un-American activities wearing his stormtrooper uniform for dramatic effect. He testified that the main focus of the Boone camps was instilling the four H's: health, Hitler, Heils, and hatred. American boys and girls sing hymns to Der Führer and the Vaterland they have never seen. He told the committee, their youthful feet goose-step in a march of racial and religious hatred. The minds and souls of these babes in the woods are fertile field for the propaganda of the Bund. Metcalf further testified that the primary aim of Nazi sympathizers was to establish a spy network across the United States. At one point, an entire company of Illinois National Guardsmen was composed of Bund members, he said. Fritz Kuhn called the committee proceedings filthy and denied Metcalf's claims. Over the years that followed, John Metcalf would personally expose a range of plots by Hitler's American friends across the country, Hart writes. Metcalf quickly accomplished more than any other single individual working to unravel the threat posed by Nazi sympathizers to U.S. national security. In the late 1940s and 50s, under different leadership during the Red Scare era, congressional committees would focus on individuals suspected of communist sympathies, leading to Hollywood's blacklist and Wisconsin Senators Joseph McCarthy's crusade against federal government employees accused of communist affiliations. After testifying, John Metcalf received death threats and his car was struck by machine gun bullets in an ambush, according to his family history written by his son. He escaped unharmed. The Bund collapsed shortly after it hosted a pro-American rally that drew more than 20,000 supporters to New York Madison Square Garden in February 1939. Images of Washington hung next to swastikas and speakers denounced the Jewish-controlled media and called for a return to a racially pure America. Kuhn was a keynote speaker. A force of 2,000 mounted police officers formed a barrier outside the hall, attempting to keep angry anti-Nazis from rushing in. Scuffles broke out in the streets and sidewalks. A few months later, Kuhn was charged with the embezzlement and tax evasion, found guilty, and sent to prison. I have to say this as well. It says 2,000 mounted officers form a barricade to protect the Nazis from the anti-Nazis. Today, I can't say this for all instances, but a majority of it, like you look at Charlottesville, North Carolina, when the Nazis stormed the freaking university, the police let the Nazis attack everyone. Even the freaking professors and students were getting attacked. And it was because of people that stepped in to defend them that they did not get killed. And it wasn't the police that stepped in to stop the professors and students from being attacked by the Nazis. It was other people. Who all this anti-Nazi legislation will be targeting. The people who protected the professors and the students, that's who this anti-Nazi legislation will be targeting, should it pass. Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, marking the start of World War II. More than 2 years later, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, prompting the United States' entry into the war. Afterwards, and you have some pictures here of, I guess this is John or James. After his time as a reporter, James Metcalf, a former Cimmerian and G-man, enjoying a long career as a national known poet. He and his wife Lillian had 3 children. He died in Dallas in 1960 at age 53. John Metcalf worked as a correspondent for Time magazine and New York Herald Tribune during World War II. After the war, he ran a lecture bureau and represented political clients. In the late 1960s, he returned to government service as a part of the U.S. Agency for International Development. John was the first of the brothers to write poems for newspapers and had published a book of poetry in 1931. After James' death, John took over his brother's poetry column and continued it for several years. He and his wife Violet had 2 children. He had died in 1971, San Antonio, Texas, at age 66. John returned to the campus in 1940 and gave a talk about his undercover experiences, saying that the communist, Nazi, and fascist elements in this country were spreading hate based on class, race, and religion. He urged rigid enforcement of existing laws to wipe out subversive activity rather than new legislation, and as long as the American people adhere to the Bill of Rights, however, there will be no need to fear the isms in the United States, he said. That's an interesting statement, but that's from 1940. He had not seen the war yet. He had not learned about everything that I had just... Well, he knew about everything I just read, but as far as, like, the Nazis being inspired by Jim Crow in America and stuff like that, I don't think that he knew any of that stuff. And then he basically took, like, a neoliberal take at the end of this, which I guess could be worse, He did say that, hate is bad, so that's good. But here's the issue with this neoliberal thing that he's talking about here, this neoliberal system, is that it failed us. And how do we know that? Because what's going on today? Like, everything that I just read in here is basically, like, repeating itself in a way today. And it's come back to a point where there is very little middle class, and it will only be the rich and the poor. And it's going to be like feudal times again, where the kings and the peasants. And the only time the kings make a middle class is to control the bottom. They make the middle class as middle management to capitulate, to try to prevent them from losing power. Like these billionaires, like in the 30s and stuff like this, all of America was in a massive labor battle. There was these billionaires who took over America, and they were sending the National Guard and Pinkertons and these privatized military people to go and shoot all these workers who were asking for better pay, and drop chemical bombs on them and strafe them with planes and shoot them with machine guns while they're sleeping. And that's like the Virginia Coal Wars and the Pinkertons and Ludlow Massacre. I think that's the name of it. I might have gotten the name of that one wrong. But there's